Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar discussion topic, and this one is going to be a little bit different this time out. I'm not going to be labeling this in the title as a discussion topic video. This is primarily going to be a video of me talking about how to get into Avatar The Last Airbender comics, because the reason I'm doing this video seems a bit weird, I suppose, because I think most people who subscribe to my channel subscribe because I do Avatar stuff, and then especially because I do Avatar comic stuff. There's not a lot of other people out there who really talk about the comics as much as I do, so this is more to appeal to the people, I suppose, who haven't read the comics yet, as a way to get into them. And the reason I'm doing it is because so often online I see on my own site, Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com, sometimes in some of my non-comic Avatar videos, and like the Avatar subreddit and stuff like that, people saying like, oh, I just finished Avatar, I just finished Korra, is there anything else to tell these stories? You know, what happened to Zuko's mom? And it's one of those things where, like, yes, people come in and give them the answer, like, okay, buy this, buy this, buy this, but like, there's a difference between giving a text response, like, just get these series, and actually showing off the actual books to get. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video, explaining the order of the books, how many books there are, the different ways you can get each series, and stuff like that. So yeah, because there is a lot of extra content in the Avatar world apart from the show. It's not just the 61 episodes of Avatar and the 52 episodes of Korra. There are a bunch of comics and other stuff. But for this video, I'm going to focus on the Dark Horse comics end of things. And we start off with this book. It's just a solo book. It's kind of standalone. It's not part of a series. All it is this. This is the Lost Adventures collection. And it is effectively what it says. It is basically a collection of short little comic stories set in between episodes and in between the seasons of Avatar The Last Airbender. So they are literally the Lost Adventures, the adventures of Team Avatar that we didn't see in the show. And they split the book into like a section on book 1, a section on book 2, a section on book 3, and a section called bonus stories, which aren't canon. And they're called bonus stories because they're the ones that aren't canon. Everything else in the book is. Yeah, there aren't that many book 1 water stories. There are only, let me see here, 5 stories, and only one of them I think is really notable. It's a book called Relics. You learn some stuff about Airbender culture there. There's a good few, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 stories about book 2 Earth, and then 12 stories in book 3 Fire. And there are also, as I said, some of the stories set in between in between the seasons, which are very interesting. So there's the cover. It's a standalone book. The retail price here, it says on the back, was $14.99, but I think on Amazon you can find this for a lot cheaper because it is the first Dark Horse Avatar comic released. And it's not going to blow you away, I think, with a ton of extra new content. A lot of this is just kind of for fun. They're more funny things, but at the same time they do answer some reasonably big questions. Like it says in the back of the book here, a few of the questions. Where did the last of the Airbenders hide? When was Zuko and Mei's first kiss? Who would win in an earthbending showdown, Toph or King Boomy? And why did the Earth Kingdom decide to travel the world in disguise? I'll just briefly mention my favourite story. Let me just find it. Page 99. It's called The Bridge. And it's a really interesting story of Katara in between book 2 and 3. While Aang is obviously badly injured, basically in a coma after what happened with Azula, after they've met up with Hakoda again, just before basically book 3 is about to start, you have Katara just trying to heal Aang, narrating about how she feels, like basically explaining the story of like what Kuei is doing, the little bits of story that happened, leading them to being kind of undercover on that Fire Nation boat, as we see at the start of book 3. And it's just a really fascinating story as you get really deep into kind of Katara's feelings about things, like why she isn't talking to her father just yet, and how she just all of her hope really lingers on Aang returning, and that's why she's so eager to heal him, and that's what she's focusing on. Really interesting story, and like I almost say like the book is worth it for the bridge alone, but there's some other really nice stories. Like there's a one about an Earth Kingdom orphanage during book 2 Earth, that's really good. That's probably the longest story in the entire book. It's about 20 or something pages. But yeah, this is a like 220 plus page book, and apart from the final 2 stories, which you can clearly tell are not canon, everything else in the book is 100% canon. So that's The Lost Adventures, the only real standalone book that we kind of have in relation to Avatar. So it's definitely worth getting, though I don't think it's like completely 100% essential. But if you're interested, it's out there. Next we get into, I suppose, the books that I think more people know about, but perhaps don't know the order in which to get them, the different ways that you can actually get these books. And these are the start of the actual original Dark Horse comic stories. The creative team on all of these books that I'm about to show you is written by Jean Luen Yang and art by Team Gurihuru. Kawano and Sasaki are the 2 members of that team. They do the art. And obviously the story is like assisted on, basically the main gist of the story comes from Mike and Brian, and then Jean Yang just writes it. So Mike and Brian do heavily assist on these books without getting writing credits effectively. So it is canon content completely. So the format of all of these series is that they are initially released in parts. So there are 3 parts per series, and then they are later collected into a hardcover edition. And let's just give you an example right here. The first of these original comic series is called The Promise. Now here's the part 1 cover. As you can see, it's a fairly small-ish book compared to, say, a single issue of a comic like this. The book is a little bit smaller than that. So it's kind of graphic novel sized. It's between 70 and 72 pages of story per each of these books. So, times 3, that's, 210 to 216 pages per story. So there's a lot of content in these. And yeah, this is part 1 of The Promise. There is part 2 of The Promise. And finally part 3. So they do all of these series in 3 parts, and together they make up the entire Promise series. And it's really cool. You get a sense of what the art is like for Team Gurihuru, and you'll notice just looking at the covers, their art gets better as it goes on. So that's a really interesting thing to look at, because Team Gurihuru actually did some art in this book, and their art looks kind of very cartoony, and like you can tell it's like their first time doing Avatar, and you really see them progress as you kind of go through the comics. So that's a really interesting thing to follow if you actually start reading these comics. But yeah, The Promise, so there's the 3 individual parts, individual 70 to 72 page books, just a story, very basic. And then later on it was collected, all 3 parts, into this big hardcover book. There's the scale, it's a lot bigger. And this just collects all 3 of these books into this one, and there are some extras as well. Really nice back cover as well, actually. Now, the thing of looking at the interior of this book is that the whole book is not that the pages are that much bigger. They actually are a little bit bigger than the individual parts, but they're not the full page. And the reason for that is because some of the pages have those annotations on the side, which are just notes from the writer about little things perhaps you didn't quite notice on your first time reading through, or reasons for why a character was written in this way. It's just little comments about why the story is written in the way it was. And then at the end of the book, you also get some really cool concept art stuff, explaining like the new character designs for the characters in this series and stuff like that. So, you get extra from this book. It collects all 3 parts. And if you're not interested in having a bunch of kind of soft cover books, this big hardcover one and collecting them this way is a good way to do it as well. In terms of price, these individual parts retail for $10.99, but again, they'll be cheaper on Amazon, especially the older ones. And the same kind of goes for the hardcovers, in that the older books, like the Promise hardcover, is a lot cheaper than, say, the more recent hardcover releases. But these things retail for $39.99 US. So you pay a little bit more usually, than getting the individuals, but you get a sturdier book, you get it, the pages are bigger, and you get some extras as well. So it's definitely a personal thing about which way you go in terms of choosing which way to get the series. If you just want the story and are kind of trying to keep the cost as low as possible, just get the individual parts. But if you want a kind of collector's edition type book, get the hardcover. That's basically all there is to it. Next series, though, is the most important one. I'll briefly give you a kind of synopsis of what The Promise is about, actually. The Promise, you have a few scenes, a few pages at the start of The Promise set immediately after the very end scene of Avatar The Last Airbender. After that, they basically skip ahead a year, and the main gist of The Promise is that you have three young leaders effectively in charge of things. So Zuko's only been Fire Lord for a year. King Kwai has only really been acting king of the Earth Kingdom for about a year, because obviously Long Feng was running things beforehand. And then Aang, of course, in a leadership role as the Avatar in a world at relative peace now, is also taking up a leadership role in the world. And it's basically all about them deciding what to do in the aftermath of the war. The big topic of debate is the Fire Nation colonies within the Earth Kingdom. They've been there for effectively 100 years, these Fire Nation people living in a section of the Earth Kingdom that ultimately becomes Republic City in Korra. And the argument is about, with the war over, do we get rid of these people and send them back to the Fire Nation and have the Earth Kingdom reclaim their lost land? Or do we let the Fire Nation keep that land because they've lived there for so long, but sort of justify part of the war? It's a really interesting debate that happens, and ultimately the promise is that Zuko is asking Aang to kill him if he starts to become like Ozai and make poor decisions for the world. And Aang kind of has to reluctantly agree to that, and so Zuko kind of begins to more side with the idea of letting the Fire Nation keep this land, and you can see where the conflict is coming from, because Aang is on the side of giving the Earth Kingdom back that land. So that's what that's about. Really interesting story to start it off in terms of a series that makes sense to come immediately after the end of the series, dealing with the aftermath of the war. The next series is, as I said, very important one for a lot of fans out there, is The Search. As you can see from the cover for part 1, the character in the background is of course Ursa, Zuko's mother. This is the series where we get to find out what happened to Zuko's mom. We get Ursa's backstory in this, we find out all about her, what happened to her. It's revealed here. This series tells you all you need to know. So it's a big story in terms of, like, you kind of have to read it almost, but yeah, there's part 1. You can also see Azula is reintroduced into this series as well. So some very important stuff happening here, and that cover shows you some spirit stuff happening. And especially on the part 2 cover, you can see it's very spiritual focused as well, which is actually a really surprising turn for the story. So there's the part 2 cover, and then here's the part 3 cover. And on the back you can see some of the other characters and more spirity stuff. But yeah, really great series, this one. And I know a lot of people did jump on board to the Avatar comics when this one came out, because of the important reveals about Ursa, Zuko's mother. But absolutely The Promise is worth reading as well, just to kind of read them in order, started off that way. And here is the Search hardcover edition for anyone wondering. Really nice kind of bright cover, getting across the key characters. And on the back, the kind of key character of importance throughout the entire series, Ursa. So that's a really cool series as well. Next series, the third comic series, is called The Rift. And this is kind of a very Toph-focused story. She's obviously, of course, been in like The Promise and stuff like that, but she really comes to the forefront in this. And this story is more about dealing with the other unresolved issue from the end of Avatar, that being Toph and her relationship with her parents. It was left very open, you know, she sent the letter off with Hawkeye to them, and we didn't hear anything about it. There was no reunion between Toph and her parents in the show, and they finally begin to approach it here, and how she deals with that. It's really interesting. And then Aang's plot in this book is he gets a visit from the spirit of Avatar Yang Chen, about some spirit issues happening over this new refinery that's opened up, and it happens to be a refinery that is run by Toph's father, and stuff happens from there. So really interesting series that puts Aang and Toph at conflict with each other, which is really interesting. But yeah, there's that part 1. Here's the part 2 cover. You can tell they go underground into the refinery. Some action happens and stuff like that. And then in part 3 is really interesting. You know, Aang fighting a spirit in the Avatar state. Some pretty cool action stuff. And again, the spirit stuff in this comic specifically is actually really interesting. The way they approach doing it. So that's a really good series. The Rift as well. If you're a big fan of Toph, that's a very good series. And here's the Rift hardcover. You know, just getting across that spirit stuff and Aang and Toph are the focus of the story, and then the statue is of great importance to the story as well, as you eventually find out. So the Rift is another very good series, and those 3 series are the only fully complete series that we have right now. The next series is the one that is currently being released at the moment. We only have the first 2 parts of the 3, and that is Avatar: The Last Airbender, Smoke and Shadow. And we only have the first and the second part of this series out right now. Part 3 comes out in comic book stores like March 30th, so like very end of March is when part 3 comes out, and then the hardcover collection is out later on. I'll show you an image of we know what the cover looks like in a moment. Yeah, and part 3, as I said, isn't out yet, but here is what the part 3 cover looks like. So yeah, this series, at least right now, is also pretty interesting. It effectively revolves around a Fire Nation kind of political coup. May is kind of reintroduced into the story after some stuff happened with her in the Promise. And her father is basically leading a rebellion against Zuko. He wants Zuko ousted as leader and Ozai back in charge, and you know we're dealing with that and the conflict between these 2 political forces for that. And then all of a sudden these spirit characters are introduced, the Kimura Kage, who are these spirits that come in, cloud the area in smoke, and they begin to start kidnapping kids. And all the time Zuko has no idea what's going on. Aang, during the course of the first part of the story, Aang is off dealing with the stuff in the Rift, so they're kind of parts of the Rift and the Smoke and Shadow are kind of overlapping because Zuko's not really in the Rift, and Aang obviously has to return and help deal with the spirit stuff happening. That's the kind of gist of the story. And going into part 3, there's some very important stuff happening, that's of note. This one especially is hard to talk about without spoiling stuff that's happened in the previous comics, but there's some very cool stuff happening. It's not just all political stuff, but I can't spoil some stuff for you guys if you haven't read it yet. But yeah, there is going to be a hardcover for this series. Here's what the hardcover is going to look like. And that's coming out in like end of September, early October. And we've just recently got that revealed to us. So yeah, there's that. And that's basically all the books that we have right now. We do know the title of the next comic series. It's going to be called North and South. It was literally only revealed over the last 2-3 weeks. It's going to be the return of Team Avatar to the Southern Water Tribe for the first time since they left at the very start of the series. So that's going to be a very important series going forward. So here's the 3 covers, all 3 covers for North and South. And yeah, that series is starting in September. The first part comes out in September, second part comes out in January, and then the third part comes out in April, May, I believe. But you know, it's a long way away. There's no need to worry about that book just yet. We're still more than a year away from part 3 of North and South. And we assume, again, there is also going to be a hardcover, but we haven't had that revealed yet, and that won't be revealed for a while. So that's all the Avatar stuff we know about right now. So we have a bunch of books still to look forward to, still be released. This is a very good time to get into the comics. And there's not too many comics to really get into, as I said. There's just the one-off Lost Adventures book. There's the Promise series, there is the Search series, the Rift series, and we're in the process, haven't finished yet, the Smoke and Shadow series. And then coming up, North and South. So there's not too much to really wrap your head around with Avatar comics. It's better to get into them now than much later on. Now, you may be asking, what about Legend of Korra comics? You've talked all about Avatar comics. What about the Korra comics? Is there going to be any? Or what? Currently, there are no Legend of Korra comics released yet. But we do know that there are Korra comics coming. The first Korra comic is coming out for Free Comic Book Day, which is the first Saturday in May this year. And Dark Horse are going to be releasing a free Korra comic, which is going to be the first ever Korra comic. It's just going to be a very quick story, probably only around 10 pages or so. But based on the cover, which you can see here, this story looks like it's going to be the story of how Korra and Naga met for the first time, which seems perfect to tell in just a couple of pages. Really important characters and how they met. So that's going to be our first one. But we are also getting Korra comics in the same format as this, 70 or so page graphic novels done in 3 parts. They are going to be starting in fall 2016. We don't know a lot of information at all about these. The creative team on them is going to be an artist called Brittany Williams. We've seen some of her work, but we haven't seen any of it in colour yet, so we're not going to bother showing you guys what it is. And then the writer is actually going to be one of the series creators, Mike DiMartino, so that's really important. We know for a fact it's going to be set after book 4, so it's going to be a direct continuation of where Korra left off. And they're going to, of course, deal with the Korra-Salmon relationship. They've specifically said that's going to be somewhat of a focus, but it's also going to be about the rebuilding of Republic City. But in general, we haven't been told what the plot of that series is going to be. We don't have any covers for that just yet, but I assume any week now we could be expecting a reveal, a full-on reveal for with announcements of when those books are coming out, the Korra comics. Because as I said, we've got Avatar comics announced into May next year, and we still don't know when the Korra comic coming out in fall this year is coming out. So so they're going to reveal it in a big way coming up shortly. But yeah, and the Korra comics on the horizon is basically the reason I'm doing this video. Now is a perfect time to catch up on the comics that are out so far. Especially come next month when we're finished Smoke and Shadow. That's 4 comic series complete, not too many series to deal with, and then you can be on board for the start of North and South and the start of the next Korra comics. After that, it might get confusing because we're going to have Korra comics released and Avatar comics released at roughly the same time. But yeah, that's been the video. In the comments, let me know if you have any questions about getting into Avatar comics. I'll briefly say before we end, the comics are available digitally. You don't have to buy them physically. Digitally, for these books, because they're not single issues, are not the most reliable way to get the comics, because they're often late to update their site. But I think the majority, I think basically all of the Promise, all of the Search, all of the Rift, and I think the Lost Adventures, at the very least, are available on Dark Horse Digital's website. And I think they should be available on places like Comixology and iBooks. But I'm not fully sure. I don't really keep up with the digital side of the Avatar comics, because they're very rarely released on the same day as the actual physical copies of the books. Which is why I have all the physical copies. So, just be aware they are available digitally, but you're probably going to get the books for cheaper physically from Amazon or something like that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say again. If you have any comments, questions, leave them in the comments below. But other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.